Hello, welcome all to this fourth Google Hangout session of the PBL-MOOC. First, again, for some again, and for others who are watching for the first time, some instruction about asking questions. In the upper right corner, you see kind of a rubric square where you can click on, and there's a Q&A option. If you click on there, you can pose a question, and we will address them during this session. If we do not have time, or if we see it too late that there is a question, we will try to answer your question on the discussion forum so that everybody can see it. For this session, first Herco will say something about the participants and the team charters you all submitted. So I give the floor to Herco.
Okay, hello everybody. And when I say everybody, I mean, well, there are about 2,900 people enrolled in the MOOC. 1,600 of you signed in, but I think about 400 people signed up to a group. And of these groups, we see that about 300 to 400 people are active every day. So this is the everybody I was mentioning, but you might wonder who you are. Well, on average, you're between 30 and 50 years old. You're driven by personal interest in signing up for this MOOC. Most of you have some to very extensive experience in education, but little experience with PBL. Looking at the disciplines, most of you indicated that you were interested in the healthy body, healthy mind topic. Almost everyone wanted to work asynchronously, and to our surprise, the majority of you have not participated in a MOOC before. Not surprisingly, therefore, you were anxious to know what was going to happen in this MOOC, and you're all very determined to finish, and that's a good thing to hear, of course. Those of you who signed up for a team, well, the teams differ widely in terms of activity. There are teams where over the weeks about 30 to 50 messages were sent, but there are also teams where almost 900 messages were sent. So of course that's only in as far as we can observe what's happening. Many of you may perhaps have decided to communicate through other channels, but at first glance there seems to be a very large differences in how the teams perform. That's also noticeable when we look at the team charters. There were 70 charters sent in, and looking at the charters, we saw that most of you indeed wanted to preferred asynchronous communication. And some of you try to make very concrete, almost smart, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely goals about how you're going to communicate. For instance, some members promised to check in every 2 days. Members agreed that to show appreciation and support and encouragement, and of course agreed on how to communicate. Most of you prefer to use Google Docs, and when you work in Google Docs, people indicated that it's nice to use color coding, or at least using acronyms to show who's contributing what. This way you can see in the document what everybody is contributing. People said that it's important to communicate in a positive manner, even when you sometimes feel frustrated because maybe for whatever reason someone isn't able to contribute. But communicating in a positive manner is very important to make you feel safe to share what's on your mind. Yeah, it's also important to ask each other for help if something is not clear or if you're having technical difficulties. Just letting know you're involved in the group is very important, because as you may have noticed, working in a virtual group is different from working in a face-to-face group, and trusting each other in a virtual group is all about predictable and reliable communication. So knowing when to expect contributions from one or another, and another issue is, of course, how to deal with people who have difficulty expressing their thoughts. And most of you said that support, patience, understanding was very important. Helping each other by asking questions. If messages are unclear, repeat back what you think that people mean, because you can be sure that miscommunication is going to happen. And as someone said, this is a great learning space, not only for learning PBL, but also for intercultural communication. And then most of you indicated in the team charters that when they feel that people are beginning to lurk and not really contribute, that the team leader should step in and send a private message to the inactive member, and if necessary, after 1 week of inactivity, some even said that the member should be given an observer role. That may be harsh, because there can be reasons for lurking, such as people can have difficulty with technology, or they may not understand the task, but at least it's something that shows that leadership is very important in these kinds of virtual collaborative environments. Conscientiousness is more important than in face-to-face group, and presentation skills are more important than a face-to-face group, and we can see that because many of you have decided to work really hard on visual products like mind maps or infographics, and you can see that these attract lots of attention and really add to the quality of the discussions, for instance, and to the quality of the assignments. What's also noticeable in virtual groups is that you share unique information much more than you would do in a face-to-face group. In a face-to-face group, people tend to discuss about things that they all know. And here we see also in the discussion fora that the discussion is really comprehensive and rich, and really a joy to track. And what may also help is that there are fewer status inequalities in virtual groups, so that people may feel less inhibited to share. So all in all, we're very pleased with group work, but we can see now that the forming and storming phases and norming phases are over, and the groups have to perform by regularly sending in assignments. And we're really curious to hear from you what that feels like. So here I'd like to send out an invitation to one of you who would be willing to join us in a next Hangout and tell us more about how you experience this MOOC. Well, talking about experiences, in the discussion fora, we open a thread where we ask about good experiences with PBL. I noticed that in many places people are also wondering about when things do not work according to plan. So we hope to in one of the next Hangouts pay some attend to, well, what it's like to have a PBL program and see what kind of maintenance is required to make it all happen. So these are some of the topics we could address in the next Hangouts. So that's so far that's all about the teamwork for now. So I'll give the floor back to Geraldine.
Thank you, Herco. So people who do want to join this Google Hangout, you can mail us through the Novoed platform so that we can arrange for you to be invited in the next Google Hangout. What I did during this week was I selected some of the assignments a little bit at random, because there are too many to look at all of them. So that's why it's important that you all peer review one another's assignments. And I try to see what the main discussion points are that you all address. Overall, we see that you all raise questions about whether PBL is feasible in all situations, what the role is of the tutor or of the students, what we should expect from them. And interestingly is to see that the groups have different opinions about a number of things, like what kind of knowledge should the tutor have. Some groups say, well, they have to be a subject expert in order to guide the students in a domain. And other groups say, no, it's less important because we cannot pass on all information, or some call it knowledge, to a student. So it's rather a role of motivating and coaching the learner in the group process. It's an interesting discussion, and I think all of you who are interested in this and are not in track 1, I think this will be part of further elaboration in this track, so you can always follow the assignments of that track, and probably also discussions on the discussion forum on it. Another thing that I saw, or that I remarked, was on what kind of problems there should be. And I think some of the discussions are also related to a language issue, because there was a specific group who had a discussion on whether the problem should be structured or whether it should be an ill-structured problem. And there, reading further, I think it was kind of a language issue, because ill-structured is a specific term in education, and it refers to problems for which there is not really one clear-cut solution. And if you have problems where that is the case, they often say that these are well-structured. Of course, it does not mean that if we provide students with a problem, even if it's an ill-structured problem, that you give it in a kind of structured way. So there's still some issue. But it's also an issue of discussion, and I think for who is interested in that and is not in track 2, it will be discussed more in detail over there. How should a problem look like, and what does it mean, a problem? Can it be a case, or should it really be an actual problem as such? Those are kind of the two striking things that came back in different groups, but also more related to the way you all dealt with the assignment. I think it would be good for the group to check afterwards when you have a number of questions and you provide answers, but sometimes the answers that are provided are not really an answer to your question. Perhaps that's not a problem, but then it may be necessary to adjust your question or indicate you haven't found the answer to that question. For instance, one of the questions was, is PBL suitable for all age children? And the answer was, PBL is suitable for grade 8. Yeah, we know something about age-related aspects, but we do not know the answer whether it's suitable for all grades. So there is still, some issue, I think. Additionally, in the assignments, when I look at the end of the assignments, I see a lot of references, in most cases, not in all cases. But I think in order to know the value of what you're saying, or whether there is evidence of what you're saying, it would be good to integrate the references in your text. So after you make a statement, for instance, if you say PBL is suitable for grade 12, then I would put a reference after that, so that you show that there has been done some kind of research to get some evidence for that. Because as a lot of you use very normative language, especially when we talk about the role of the tutor. They say, okay, a tutor should do this and this and this. But I think you really have to look at, is there also evidence for this? Can you underpin it? Is there literature and research that make this claim kind of more valid? And of course, you have gradation in there. One case study provides less evidence than a meta-analysis on the effects of, for instance, instruction. So there also consider it a little bit when you answer your questions in the assignments. Also interesting to see is that some of you also reflected on the process when submitting their assignment, and you see that some groups are searching. So they first try to collaborate in a synchronous way, then they do it asynchronous, and they are now looking for a combination, but still are struggling with how they can really work efficiently with it. We see some groups that use a number of tools like Ego, Trello, Google Drive, and so on. And it's easy when you're familiar with it, but it also causes some stress for students for which it's the first time to really being involved in such an online environment and having to learn all those specific kind of tools. So that's also an issue that you have to sort out within your group. And then last point on the assignments, what I saw was that some of the assignments, and we did get also some questions about this, are kind of individual assignments, so that one group member posts his assignment on NovoEd, while the idea is that you post an assignment of the whole group. Of course, one person has to submit it, but the text, the assignment itself, has to be a product of the group. And an additional thing is we already discussed the language issue, so we really do not have any problems that you discuss in another language but English in your group. But please make sure that when you submit the assignment that that's in English, because other students have to review your assignments, and you can only get valuable feedback that you can use if people understand what you've been written. So it's very hard if you do not understand Portuguese, for example, to peer review a Portuguese assignment. I think these were my main reflection on the assignments, and I'll give now the floor to Daniela, who will address some additional issues as well.
Well, Geraldine, you've discussed many things that we saw in the assignments, I think. I also saw quite some confusion about the word problem, and some of it is related to language, and some of it is related to the specific way that we use the word problem in problem-based learning, because problems in problem-based learning are not always equivalent to learning to problem solve. We view problems as a stimulus to learning, something that should make the learning relevant for students, something that stimulates retention and transfer, because the learning is contextualized in an authentic task. But it's often not only about learning to solve a problem. There are a range of problems that are used. Some of them are cases, patient cases or law cases that you could see as having a solution. But some of them are ethical dilemmas or problems that show that you need to study the terminology in a domain to understand what it's all about. And if you're in track 2, you will see more about that range of problems in the materials that are provided there. Some of the confusion is also, I think, caused by the fact that in Maastricht, we try to make the entire curriculum problem-based, whereas in many other places, some PBL cases are added alongside a more traditional curriculum, or so that's a different way of implementation. And maybe if you go into track 3, you will learn more about that. Herco, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, track 3 at the moment is the track where groups are looking into assessment, and in the remainder of this MOOC we'll look at implementation issues. So I noticed that a lot of discussion on these topics is currently linked to the lectures, and I expect that this discussion will continue in track 3.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. So my next task is then to look at the more practical issues of what is happening in the MOOC, in the course. And as of this week, the 3 tracks have split up. So some groups are working in track 1, others in track 2, and others in track 3. And most of you have noticed already that you can see all the assignments of all the tracks and the learning materials in those assignments. That might be an advantage if you're interested to looking at other issues as well. The disadvantage is that you also see all the reminders for those tracks, and unfortunately this is something that we can't change because the platform doesn't really support the fact that you split up in tracks. So you only need to look at the reminders for your own track. You can ignore reminders for the other tracks. And a second, more pragmatic issue that I wanted to address is that we see, as Harko said, that many groups are really starting to function now, but we also see that a number of people are lost because they haven't found an active group and they would like to either join a different group or merge with a different group. And some people are getting frustrated about this. So my proposal would be that after this Hangout, I will open a specific forum on the discussions page for people who are looking for another group or groups that are looking for other participants, so that you have one place that you can go and look at. So I can also at this stage probably answer Razim's question in the Q&A section. Razim asked, should I study the materials that are provided during the brainstorming phase or in part A or in part B in the reporting phase? Razim, the sequence that we usually follow is that the group of students discusses the problem description, brainstorms and gets to learning questions. Then all the group members go away and study the learning resources. And then they come back and report what they have found and discuss whether together they can answer their own learning questions. So that puts the studying learning resources in the middle. And that's why we have added them to both part A and part B, so that you can schedule your studying learning resources somewhere in between the brainstorming and the reporting phase. And that could be partly in the end of week 1 and partly at the beginning of week 2. I hope that answers your question. If not, then please ask another one and we'll come back to it later. These were, I think, the most important practical things that I wanted to discuss. I'm not sure, Geraldine, am I continuing now also, or have we other issues on the list?
I don't think we really have other issues on the list, so you can continue. I think there is one additional remark from Razim as well about the organization of this MOOC. Only advice on usability issues. I suggest this is something it would be helpful if we get some feedback on it. Perhaps you could also add this to a discussion forum, Razim. So Daniela, I think you can continue.
Yeah, it does bring back one other thing that I would like to mention, and that is that this week you will see in between of the reminders that there's a midterm evaluation that is available to you. This is a good opportunity for you to let us know what your experiences are, because this is the first time that we are organizing this MOOC. This is the first time that we're trying out this design, and we're not sure that it's or we are sure that it could be significantly improved. So we are very happy with all your suggestions and all your evaluations. on usability issues, but also on other things. So please fill in that evaluation, and there will be another final evaluation at the end of the MOOC. The last topic that I would like to tell you a bit more is how this project came about. To give you a bit of insight of why we did organize this MOOC and why it's shaped as it is. I think all of us are part of e-learning groups at Maastricht University, and we had been following this rise of MOOCs with interest, but also a bit hesitant because the massive scale seemed to be contradictory to the small-scale group learning that Maastricht University promotes in problem-based learning. But then about a year and a half ago, we got a question from the executive board to organize a MOOC. Of course, to make Maastricht University visible, to be participant to this MOOC development, but also, and probably more importantly, to start up an internal discussion about what we as a university should be doing with MOOCs and maybe what not. So we got together a university-wide project team, and we decided to organize a MOOC around problem-based learning because it's very central to Maastricht University's educational vision. It's something that we have experience with, are known for, and it's also a topic that all the faculties could contribute to. But then we got to a next problem because we had seen that many MOOCs that are out there fall back on a fairly traditional instructional design. There are some eminent professors giving a lecture, there are some reading materials that students study, maybe an assignment or a multiple choice test, but that's about it. And that's what we did 100 years ago with an eminent professor in a big lecture hall. It would be really daft, we thought, to organize a MOOC about problem-based learning and then to fall back on a design like that. So we posed ourselves the challenge to develop a MOOC that follows problem-based learning or that follows the learning principles that underlie problem-based learning and other modern learning methods in the context of a MOOC. So that's why we have centered this MOOC around problems. That's why we have centered this MOOC around small group learning in your teams. That's an experiment. We don't know if it's a good thing to do. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It seems to be working for some and not for others. So we're very eager to learn from what we see and from what we hear from you. Would we think that this MOOC is really problem-based learning? I've seen that question more or less pass by on a discussion forum. My answer would be I'm really not sure, because in some aspects it's like problem-based learning, but there are really important differences, like the fact that you as a group don't have a tutor, that the teams are mostly self-formed. So maybe the answer should be no, but at least we try to implement an instructional design that was more in line with modern learning theories, with modern learning principles, and we'll see what it's like. For us internally, I would like to add that the project has already been a success, because it's not very often that we get a cross-faculty project where people from different faculties come together, collaborate, and discuss what we all think about problem-based learning, what we think is important, what we think is still PBL, and what we think is not PBL anymore. And we've had many interesting discussions already. So now it's up to you to tell us what you think. Geraldine?
Okay, thank you, Daniela. I think it's really important, I think, to ask for feedback of all participants. And so please fill in the survey so that we get some kind of idea whether this is going okay, whether this is what you expected or what else. There are no questions anymore, I see here. Although we have some viewers, I can see, but I also noticed that most of you watch the YouTube video afterwards. So if you do so, you can always still ask questions on the discussion forum about this Google Hangouts. Don't hesitate for doing that. Just checking, Herco, Daniela, whether you still want to say something. No? Okay, then we'll close this session and we see one another next week again on the 6th of November. We'll put an announcement on NovoEd so that you're reminded of this Google Hangout. Thanks in the meantime for joining us. Bye.